take shape, rigid shape, text diagram, income, lifestyle, obligations, permission to take risks. You don't realize you're losing freedom because you never named it. You only notice that you're busier, more responsible, more mature, but in reality, you're becoming harder to maneuver. There is a difficult truth. Most people don't choose their lives, they adapt to them, and money is the tool that makes that adaptation feel reasonable. Adapt long enough, and it gets called fate. People often think poverty means not having money, but poverty runs deeper than that. Poverty is when every decision has to ask money first. Poverty is when you can't stop to think because stopping means losing income. Text diagram, two ways of living. Reactive living, expenses, income, anxiety, repeat. Designed living, goals, structure, cash flow, choice. Many intelligent people are trapped in the first mode not because they don't understand, but because they don't have breathing room to understand. When life is locked by obligations, long-term thinking becomes a luxury. No one designs their life while running. This is where money becomes the silent architect of your life. It decides what time you wake up, what you feel stressed about, what you fear losing most. It doesn't need to show up. Its absence alone is enough to create panic. If you feel a heaviness while listening to this, that's a good sign. It means you're starting to see the structure, not just the problems. Freedom doesn't disappear in a day. It erodes through reasonable decisions repeated over many years. There's something uncomfortable that must be said plainly. Hard work is not the problem. In many cases, hard work is exactly what keeps people stuck in place. I know that sounds paradoxical. We're taught from a young age that if we try hard enough, everything will work out. And in the early stages of life, hard work does help. It pulls you out of chaos. It gives you income. It helps you stand on your feet. The problem is that many people never leave that stage. They turn hard work into identity. And when a temporary strategy becomes a permanent identity, it starts working against you. Hard work is a tool to escape poverty. But without knowing when to stop, it becomes the reason you never become free. Notice something subtle. Hard workers are praised, trusted, given more responsibility, seen as reliable pillars. And because of that, it becomes harder and harder for them to leave their position. Not because they don't want to, but because too much depends on them. Responsibilities accumulate. Family, work, financial obligations, and eventually their life works, but only as long as they keep running. Text diagram, hard work, trust, more responsibility, fewer options. This is a very refined trap. No collapse, no crisis, just a constant feeling that you can't stop. And people often mistake that feeling for maturity. A major mistake hardworking people make is tying their self-worth to productivity. When you do a lot, you feel valuable. When you slow down, you feel uneasy. And so you bind yourself to a pace with no exit. When your value comes from always being busy, freedom becomes a threat. Money plays a central role in this trap. Hard workers often earn steady income, but that money is mostly used to keep the machine running. Living expenses, obligations, stability. Very little is used to buy an exit from the system. They're not poor in terms of scarcity, they're poor in terms of choice. Text diagram, two ways of using money. Trapped, income, maintain life, keep working. Strategic, income, reduce dependence, open options. The difference isn't the amount of money, but where the money is pointed. Another thing few people realize, hard work often comes with linear thinking. Do more, get more. But life doesn't operate in straight lines. It operates through leverage. Leverage doesn't come from doing more. It comes from doing the right thing and not having to repeat it forever. Hard work helps you survive. Leverage helps you escape. Sue escapes. Many hard workers fall into this loop. They're too busy to think, and because they don't think, they keep choosing what's familiar, what's safe, what doesn't disrupt the present. Over time, their life becomes optimized for avoiding mistakes, not for freedom. Text diagram. Busy, no long-term thinking, familiar decisions, busier. No one chooses this on purpose. It happens naturally. But the price is time. And time is the one thing you can't earn back through hard work. Another common mistake is believing high income will solve everything. High income inside a broken structure only makes the trap larger and more comfortable. You can run faster, but you're still on the same track. High income doesn't break the trap. It carpets the trap. This is where financial strategy must appear. Not a get-rich-quick strategy, but a strategy to
Isso é
reduce
lima.
dependence.
Pra nós é limão.
Reducing dependence doesn't
É
mean
limão.
quitting
A
it.
lima é amarela pra
It
nós.
means
É
gradually
ao contrário.
reducing
Ah, é o contrário.
what is possible for you to stop. Dangerous dependencies. Lifestyle tied tightly to current income. Debt used to maintain an image. Work that cannot be separated from personal time. Plans that always say maybe next year. Hard workers are very good at enduring, but endurance doesn't create exits. It only prolongs the present state. Endurance helps you survive. Strategy helps you leave. Here's a truth you may not have heard. Many people don't need more money. They need fewer obligations, fewer fixed costs, fewer irreversible decisions. Text diagram. 2 ways to optimize life. Wrong direction. Increase income, increase obligations, increase pressure. Right direction. Reduce dependence, increase breathing room, increase options. Breathing room is the key variable. Without it, you can't think, you can't observe, you can't redesign your life. You only react. No one designs a future while being strangled by bills. Many hard workers fear change not because they're weak, but because they've built too many things that depend on them. Change then isn't just a job change, it's a structural change to life itself. So they postpone. They tell themselves later. But later rarely arrives, not because they're lazy, but because the current system doesn't allow them to stop and think. Any system that doesn't allow you to stop is a system that is using you. The solution isn't immediately doing less. It's asking better questions, not how do I earn more, but how do I become less dependent on always having to earn more? When you start asking that, you move from being a hard worker to being the designer of your life. That's the line between a busy life and a deliberate one. Hard workers aren't trapped because they're weak. So they're trapped because they're too good in a system not designed for freedom. Here's another uncomfortable truth. Most people don't lose freedom because of one big wrong decision. They lose it through a series of small, reasonable decisions that are socially praised and rarely questioned. There's no dramatic collapse. No day you wake up and say, today I'll trade away my freedom. It happens slowly, quietly, and that's why it's dangerous. Freedom is rarely taken. It's usually given away, piece by piece. Start with the most common decision, lifestyle upgrades. When income rises, the natural reflex is to upgrade, not to show off, but to deserve it. Better home, safer car, more comfort. Every upgrade has a good reason, and because it's reasonable, it's never questioned. What few people see is that every upgrade brings something invisible, long-term obligation, not just money, but time, dependence, and the ability to say no later. Text diagram, income, lifestyle, fixed costs, ability to pivot. You don't become poorer after each upgrade, you become less flexible, and flexibility is the foundation of freedom. Freedom isn't about how much money you have, it's about how many decisions you can refuse. The next decision often comes quickly. A house. A home is called stability, success, settlement, and yes, it brings safety. But finance doesn't care about feelings, it cares about structure. Many people buy homes not because they're ready, but because they're afraid of falling behind, afraid prices will rise, afraid of judgment, afraid of being seen as unstable. So they sign a 20, 30-year commitment. Text diagram. Mortgage, long-term fixed costs, fewer mistakes allowed, maintenance pressure. From that moment, some choices quietly disappear. You can't take long breaks. You can't risk much. You can't fail. You're not forbidden. You're just afraid. A house doesn't take your freedom. Monthly payments do. Then comes the car. Sold in the language of safety and convenience, and again, that's true. But a car is also a structural financial decision. Not just the purchase price, but insurance, maintenance, fuel, and the lifestyle built around it. Many people choose cars based on current income, not on how fragile that income is. When things are fine, the car is convenience. When things break, the car becomes a non-negotiable burden. The things you cannot stop paying for decide the things you cannot stop doing. Another small but dangerous decision, consumer debt, credit cards, installments, buy now, pay later, designed not to hurt immediately. And because it doesn't hurt, it becomes normal. But consumer debt doesn't just take future money. It takes future choice. When part of your income is already promised to the past, you no longer fully own the present. Text diagram, locked cash flow, income, old debt, current expenses, nothing left. Debt doesn't make you poor instantly. It makes you unable to pivot. There's another invisible trade-off: exchanging unlimited time for money. When you solve every problem by working more, you teach life that your time has no boundary. But time is not unlimited, and when you build a life that only works if you're always present, you turn yourself into an irreplaceable part and therefore someone who cannot leave. The more indispensable you are, the less free you become. Many people believe these decisions are necessary steps, and to some extent, they are. The problem isn't any single decision. It's the structure they form together. Text diagram, freedom locking structure. House, cars, debts, high lifestyle, high fixed costs, no room for mistakes, fear of change, long-term trap. Life isn't locked by one lock, it's locked by a whole ring of keys you handed away. This is why many people reach midlife confused. They can't remember where they chose wrong, because they never made a clearly wrong choice. They only made reasonable ones, and that constant reasonableness removed their ability to redesign life. Real financial strategy isn't about avoiding these decisions. It's about placing them at the right time, in the right proportion, with the right role. Houses aren't bad, cars aren't bad, debt isn't bad, but they must serve freedom, not replace it. Questions to ask before major decisions. Does this lock me into a long-term structure? If income drops 30%, can I still adapt? Am I buying convenience or selling future choice? If a decision makes it impossible to stop, it's not safety, it's a constraint. Many people think freedom is a luxury. In reality, it's often traded away for very ordinary things: convenience, validation, the feeling of keeping up. Small financial decisions kill big freedom, not because they're expensive, but because they're normal. Freedom doesn't disappear because you chose wrong. It disappears because you never stop to ask, is this opening or locking my future? If you've made it this far, you may see something important. The issue isn't how many wrong choices you made. It's that your life is operating inside a structure you never consciously designed. And that's not your fault. Very few people are taught how to design a life. They're taught how to adapt to one. Redesigning life doesn't mean burning everything down. It doesn't start with quitting your job, selling your house, or running away. It starts by seeing the structure that's holding you in place. What is structure? Structure is what makes your life work only if you keep running. Income, fixed costs, obligations, pace. Together they form a system, and that system either serves you or uses you. If your life only works when you're always present, you don't own that life. Redesign begins by separating emotion from structure. Many people evaluate life through feelings: tired, bored, pressured. But emotions are signals. Structure is the cause. If structure doesn't change, emotions return, no matter how much you rest. Let's talk about money, not because it's everything, but because it shapes your time most clearly. How you earn money decides when you wake up. How you spend money decides whether you dare to stop. Text diagram. Two financial structures: dependent structure, time, income, expenses must keep working. Proactive structure, time, systems, cash flow, choice. The difference isn't how much money you have, it's whether money keeps flowing when you stop. If income stops the moment you stop, you're in a dependent structure. The first step in redesign is creating margin, breathing room. Margin isn't wealth. Margin is being able to stop briefly without everything collapsing. Without margin, you can't think long-term. You only react. No one designs the future while being choked by bills. Margin comes from two directions: reducing dependence and increasing flexibility. Many people only focus on increasing income and ignore what's draining their time and energy. Text diagram. Two ways to create margin. Increase income. Work more, more fatigue, more dependence. Reduce dependence, lower fixed costs, less pressure, more adaptability. Reducing dependence isn't about living miserably. It's about reducing non-negotiables, the things that force you to keep going even when you don't want to. Now time. Time is the only non-renewable asset, yet few treat it like one. They let it be fragmented, consumed, drained by things that don't create freedom. You don't lack time, you lack control over time. Redesigning life requires looking at how your time is used, not in a day, but across years. If your next 5 years look exactly like your last 5, that's not chance. That's structure. Text diagram. Time flow. Lock time, work, obligations, recovery, repeat. Intentional time, work, build systems, reduce dependence, open time. Many people fear redesign because they think it requires huge courage. In reality, it requires honesty. Honesty about what drains you and what no longer serves you. Courage isn't doing something big. Courage is admitting something small has been wrong for a long time. Redesign isn't a leap. It's a series of small, deliberate adjustments. Reduce one obligation, delay one upgrade. Create one income stream, not tied fully to time. Each step opens a bit more space. Text diagram, redesign process, identify structure, reduce dependence, create margin, reallocate time, open choices. One of the biggest mistakes is waiting until everything is stable to redesign. Old structures rarely create perfect conditions for change. You redesign while things are imperfect. There is no perfect time to reclaim your life. There's only the moment you stop waiting. When you start redesigning, something strange happens. Life may slow down, income may not rise immediately, but pressure decreases, and when pressure drops, options become visible again. Redesigning life isn't about getting rich fast. It's about not being forced. Not forced to do what you hate. Not forced to stay where you no longer belong. Not forced to trade living time for fake stability. Freedom doesn't come from having more, it comes from being less forced. At this stage, you may feel something different. You're no longer running, you're walking, slower, but in your direction. If you've stayed with me this far, you may realize something crucial. Our problem was never lack of effort. It was moving too fast in a direction we never questioned. And when you move fast enough, you stop hearing the most important question of your life. Slowing down isn't stopping. It's reclaiming control of pace. It's pausing long enough to see where you're going, why you're going, and what the real cost of continuing is. Many people fear slowing down because they confuse it with falling behind. But slowing down is often the only way to avoid going too far in the wrong direction. When you go wrong fast, you don't just get lost, you build a whole life there. Speed isn't dangerous. Speed in an unquestioned direction is. We live in a world that worships speed. Fast work, fast decisions, early success. Few talk about the cost of speed. Speed removes subtlety from choice. It turns thinking into reacting. It turns life into tasks instead of something lived. When you live too fast, you can't tell what you want from what you're used to. You keep a job because it's familiar. Maintain a lifestyle because it's familiar. Endure a pace because you've endured it long enough to call it normal. Familiar doesn't mean right. It just means you haven't stopped long enough to question it. Slowing down is the first act of breaking that familiarity. No drastic change required, no shocking decision. Just pause long enough to ask one uncomfortable question. If I lived like this for 10 more years, would I accept it? Many people avoid this question because they fear the answer, but avoidance is what keeps them trapped longer. A wrong life rarely comes from bad choices. It comes from never choosing again. Life rarely goes wrong in a day. It goes wrong because you never stop to adjust direction. When you slow down, you notice something strange. Many pressures you thought were mandatory are self-imposed, not because you're weak, but because you've lived in a structure where everything felt urgent. At this stage, money changes roles. It stops being a scorecard and returns to its real purpose, protecting time and choice. You stop asking, how much do I make? And start asking, how much life am I trading for this money? The cost of money isn't the number, it's the portion of life you give up. Slowing down also reveals something: speed hides well. Not every opportunity is worth taking. Some opportunities only make you busier, not freer. When you slow down, you learn to distinguish between opening opportunities and locking ones. Opening opportunities give you more future options. Locking opportunities keep you busy now with fewer exits. Not every opportunity is progress. Some are just deeper steps into the cage. At this point, your decision-making shifts, no longer driven by pressure or comparison, but by a simple question: does this make my life lighter or heavier? Lighter doesn't mean easier. It means less forced, less dependent, less maintenance. Slowing down gives you a rare gift, the ability to listen to yourself. Not fear, not social noise, but the honest sense of what drains you and what nourishes you. Life doesn't need to be optimized, it needs to be lived correctly. Here, you may realize freedom isn't perfection, it's adjustability. Being able to be wrong without collapsing, to slow down without losing everything, to change without burning the past. A wrong life doesn't come from bad choices, it comes from losing the ability to choose. Freedom isn't doing whatever you want. Freedom is not being forced to do what you don't want. When you live slowly, you begin building a life you don't need to escape from. A life that doesn't require constant recovery. A life that doesn't wait for weekends to breathe. It's not perfect, but it's yours. And that may be the ultimate purpose money, strategy, and thinking are meant to serve. A life where you don't have to keep telling yourself, one day it will be okay. Slowing down isn't about having less. It's about making sure you don't lose yourself while trying to have more. If you've listened this far, I don't expect you to act immediately. I only hope for one small thing. Next time you're about to make a big decision, pause for one extra beat, just one, and ask, is this helping me live more correctly or just helping me run faster? If you're honest enough to hear the answer, it will take you very far.